How far does China have to go? How much more repression? How big a trade deficit and loss of jobs for the American worker? And how much more dangerous proliferation has to exist before members of this House of Representatives will say, I will not endorse the status quo? As I mentioned, it's about jobs, proliferation, and human rights. And there are those who say we shouldn't link human rights and trade and proliferation and trade. I disagree. But if we just want to take up this issue on the basis of economics alone, indeed, China should not receive most favored nation status for several reasons that I'd like to go into now. I'd like to call the attention of our colleagues to this chart on the status quo that the business community is asking each and every one of us to endorse today. Right now, we have a $34 billion trade deficit with China, the 1995 figure. It will.
So at this point, current date, if I'm not mistaken, that is now up to $300 billion. All right. So it is a multiple of 10 over what it was when she was complaining about it 20 years ago.
Will be over $40 billion for 1996. Since the Tiananmen Square massacre, this figure has increased 1,000%, from $3.5 billion then to about $34 billion now. In terms of tariffs, I think it's interesting to note that the average U.S. MFN tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States is 2%, whereas the average Chinese tariff on U.S. goods going into China is 35%. Is that reciprocal? On exports, China only allows certain industries into China, of U.S. Industries into China. Therefore, only 2% of U.S. exports are allowed into China. On the other hand, the U.S. allows China to flood our markets with a third of their exports, and that'll probably go over 40%.
All right, so now here's where it gets a little in the weeds. As far as the term flooding, right? I have an issue. I take an issue with that. I'll explain it to you. Dave Smith, was actually talking about this recently. So when you talk about flooding or you're talking about a trade imbalance or stuff like that, it gets, like I said, a little bit in the weeds, right? His example, which I thought was a great example, it left some things it needed to be desired, but it's still a good example. We have, like his example was, you have a massive trade imbalance with your supermarket. You go there, you buy a bunch of shit from them, they don't buy anything from you. That's a massive trade imbalance, right? But it's good because you're getting the stuff that you want, they're getting the stuff that they want, right? It's not really a trade imbalance because at the end of the day, they're sending it over here, but you gave them money, right? So if you want, so the notion of a trade imbalance basically just means that, yes, we're getting their stuff, right? We're getting their stuff, but we gave them money. It's not like, they didn't just dump it here and just left it here. The people want that stuff. The people want that stuff at that rate. It's cheaper, right? Because those are countries that are going through their industrial revolution like we did. So they have a lot more lower skilled people that are lower paid. And, to her point, right, what she was talking about back then 20 years ago was, these are really bad conditions for a lot of these people. Now, it's just amazing to me that nowadays the conditions probably haven't improved that much. However, that's not something that people are railing against, right? They're just worried about, the stock market or whatever. Like, okay, but are you cool with semi-slave labor producing the products that you're using? I don't see a lot of argument happening on that standpoint. But let's let her finish.
And it's limitless. We have not placed any
guys. Please hit that like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much. It really helps me out a lot.
Restriction. In terms of jobs, this is the biggest and cruelest hoax of all. Not only do we not have market access, not only do they have prohibitive tariffs, not only are our exports not let in very specifically, but China benefits with at least from U.S.-China trade. The president in his statement requesting this special waiver said that China trade supports jobs in the United States, 170,000 jobs, whereas our imports from China support 10 million jobs at least. Fact is that U.S.-China trade is a job loser. And one of the reasons that is because first let me just make another point, and that is that our colleagues on the other side of this issue will say the trade with China, exports to China have increased 3 times in the last 10 years. They have. But they fail to mention that imports from China have increased 11, thereby leading to this huge trade deficit. The other issue, in addition, if intellectual property is a $3 billion loss, technology transfer is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. If you want to sell to China, your products into China, the Chinese insist that you open a factory there. They misappropriate your technology.
It's unbelievable, right? I mean, you're talking about, like, right now, she is like word for word what Trump is saying. Like word for word, right? Like you can Trump could have taken this exact same speech, done it on the House, and you know, it's exactly the same. It's what he's been saying since the 80s. You can go back and look at the Oprah Winfrey interview, which I'm sure a lot of people have done. He was saying this in the 19, I think it was 88 was that interview, which means he had already formulated these ideas in the early 80s, perhaps. You know, this is something that has been on his mind for decades and decades. You know, you guys have to have a little bit of idea that, or just the notion that he's thought these things through. You know, this isn't something that was spur of the moment, and you know he's trying to make it happen. Let her finish.
Open factories of their own, and then say, we want to see your plan for export. That's as simply as I can say it briefly. But the fact is, this isn't about products made in America. The Chinese want American products that are made in China. And the most serious of these transfers of technology are in the airline industry, where Boeing tail sections of the Boeings were mostly made in Wichita, Kansas. Now they are made in Shen province, where workers make $50 a month. And they had the transfer of the technology and the transfer of the jobs has taken place. General Motors, Ford, they're all fighting to get in to build factories there so they can make parts there. They want MFN so they can get those parts.
Here's another question you have to ask yourself. Why has she changed, right? What has changed with her? What obviously, you know, it's a follow the money kind of thing, right? What made her go from this protectionist of American, and again, this is another reason why the parties have kind of switched a little bit, right? Well, not necessarily the parties have switched, but the right has now gained all of these blue collar, middle America, working class people that Democrats used to espouse to protect, right? Because that's who she's protecting right here in this speech, right? She wants this factory in Wichita to still be operational. She's gone from that to now saying that these tariffs are abhorrent, and you know why? What's happened? You know, her mind. You know, her mind. It's very plainly obvious here, right? She's gone from a nationalistic agenda to a globalist agenda, right? She doesn't care about Wichita anymore, right? She just cares about global success, whatever the hell that means. But I'm sure if we look, there's got to be there's some finances going into play here. You know, we'll see if we figure out what that is later.
Back into the United States. So we are exporting not low-tech jobs and textile jobs. We're exporting our technology. Now, if you take a country the size of China with the very cheap, and in some instances, slave labor, the lack of market access, the rip-off of our intellectual property, the transfer of technology, a country that is not willing to play by the rules in any respect in this trade relationship, you have a serious threat not only to our relationship, but to the industrialized world. And if there's one message that I want our colleagues to understand today and our constituents, is that on this day, your member of Congress could have drawn the line to say to the President of the United States, do something about this U.S.-China trade relationship that is a job loser for the United States. And this brings us to the point that others have said, well, we can't isolate China. Do you think for 1 minute that with 10 million jobs at least, and $35 billion and be over $40 billion this year in a trade surplus, all those billions of dollars in surplus, that the Chinese are going to walk away? Where are they going to take 35 to 40% of their exports?
Oh my God.
Who's going to buy them? This is what sustains the regime, the funding and the jobs. They can't have those people out of work. They have to be at work exporting to the United States.
I have to clip that last part. That last part was fantastic. Do you hear what she just said? I mean, that was it in a nutshell, right? Right? You know what? Let me hear
that. And $35 billion and be over $40 billion this year in a trade surplus, all those billions of dollars in surplus, that the Chinese are going to walk away. Where are they going to take 35 to 40% of their exports? That's
exactly what I was saying in the last video, right? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? At this point, right, it is $400 billion. It's nearly $500 billion, right? So at this point, China sells us $500 billion worth of stuff. Right? We sell them about $100 billion worth of stuff. You implement these tariffs of 100% they're up to now, right? They're going at it. They're going at war with each other, right? When it comes to this, so we lose $100 billion in sales going that way. Okay, they lose $500 billion in sales coming this way. Where is that going to go? Who's going to buy that stuff? Those Chinese business owners, and they are panicking way more than the United States is panicking. And that's why Trump knows it's going to be a rough ride. It's going to be a storm. He's got to ride through it. He has to ride through it because they are knocking on Xi's door right now saying, you got to stop this. We can't do this. Granted, I mean, he's, is basically a communist dictatorship over there and he can't get thrown out of office. So maybe he doesn't give a shit. However, even those big time dictators, they still have bosses. No matter what anyone says, Putin still has people to answer to, right? Xi still has people to answer to. Because at the end of the day, there are massive business owners in those countries that are looking at this and they're getting worried, right? They don't want the gravy train to stop, right? They need it to keep going. Thanks a lot for coming out. This was a pretty good video. Give me a like, give me a share, give me a subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Thanks a lot, guys.